Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. This is Jim McKeith, and welcome to the Windows VCL Experts panel. Got a great collection of experts here, going to be sharing their expertise with you on VCL and sharing some of favorites and such. We do have, I'll go through to introduce everybody real quick. We have Marco Cantu, product manager. Actually, I guess I kind of like, I will introduce you and then they can read what's on the slides. Marco Cantu, product manager from Italy. He's been using Delphi for a long time. Chances are you probably read a number of his books. If you haven't, you're missing out. You need to go read them. Good books. David Millington, one of our product managers in Estonia. He's from Australia originally, and he just moved, and you can see in his webcam, he's got these really tight sloped roofs there in Estonia, where it's a lot of snow. So you just moved into an attic. Then we have Victory Fernandez, our MVP from Brazil. He has been using Delphi since 1998. Former professor, university professor, also engineer, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer. Great to have you here, Victory. Olaf Monin, he's one of our MVP regional coordinators. He's a master's degree in computer science, been programming for 20 years. Gosh, I did the math and realized how long I've been programming the day. It's crazy. Bruno, MVP, another MVP from Brazil, has written 5 Delphi books in Portuguese, over 200 articles. Kelver, I didn't see Kelver. Oh, I will figure out why he's not here.
I don't see Olaf either.
Oh, Olaf's not here. Weird. Okay, I thought I saw everybody here earlier. I wonder if they're in the as attendees. I didn't even look. I thought I saw everybody, so I would have checked.
I just sent a camera message here on WhatsApp.
Okay, all right. Well, if Kelver joins us, he's another MVP for regional coordinator from Brazil. Great guy. I had a chance to meet him. I always love getting a chance to meet MVPs and developers and such. And then we have Ian Barker, born in London but lives in Dallas, Texas now. He likes warmer weather apparently. Delphi is his superpower. Produces 4 million software he produces, has 4 million employee records reporting their hours with Delphi. And this is the panel of people who I thought was going to be here, but apparently not all of them are. I may have messed up some of the putting people in the wrong spot. So anyway, with that, if you do have any questions, oh, I don't have Dahlia on here.
I'm here, but
yes, I clearly messed up.
My video died. Oh, okay, not video, but I don't have audio.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Dahlia's here as well, but I didn't pick a slide for you. Yeah.
I don't know if you mixed me up with Olaf, but I'm also here, obviously.
You are.
Just for the record.
Oh, yeah, Holger's not there.
I set the slides up wrong, apparently, so...
I've been promoted to Marco Cantu, hooray!
And I renamed Ian to Marco Cantu. Oh, my goodness. That'll teach me to do slides in the middle of the night.
It's fine, don't worry.
So anyway, the idea with this is I will stop showing my screen because you can see most everybody's faces here. Dahlia was having some audio issues, her computer with a webcam didn't have audio, and her computer with audio doesn't have a webcam. So unfortunately, we don't get to see you, but we can hear you. So
I will be voiced at Council.
Yes, you could do sign language, I guess. So one thing is, if you aren't currently answering a question, do mute yourself just to kind of help reduce the background noise. And I'll let everybody manage that themselves. And so the idea here is we will let everybody, the attendees, if you have questions about VCL or have encountered problems or some, maybe it's like a best practice question, or if there's a specific technical question you're dealing with that you would like some help with, this would be the time to ask that. But I do want to, and I actually intended to send you all a message ahead of time to ask to prepare something, but I wanted to go around and ask each of you to share either a maybe a favorite tip around VCL or a favorite component or something that you think maybe is not as obvious to most people, or answer the big question about everybody always asks VCL versus FireMonkey and why. So we will start with Alistair, if you're up for it, Alistair, because your name came first alphabetically.
Okay, sure.
And
Well,
then
I
we'll
think
go.
certainly, yeah, in terms of VCL versus FireMonkey, I mean, FireMonkey's gotten really good lately, but if you're building a Windows-only application, then VCL should probably be your primary choice. You can also, if you just just create a single form and run it, the VCL app will start a lot faster than the FireMonkey app. VCL is a lot leaner and more efficient, and is a lot friendlier if you're doing things like remote desktop. The remote desktop application can take a lot of advantage of the Win32 API calls to compress the video and stuff for to make the sort of remote desktop stuff a lot more responsive. So that's kind of my tip. Yeah, should we carry on with the next person?
Actually,
yeah,
that's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't thought about the remote desktop. So next we'll go to Marco, if you will.
Sure. I tend to agree with what Alisa was saying. If you're focused on Windows, VCL provides like a deep integration and lets you leverage all of the platform's features more specifically. Unless your application is really heavy on graphics, because in that case, if you're using graphics, animations, shades, visual effects, and so forth, then FireMonkey provides you some extra tricks compared to what VCL generally does. I mean, of course, you can do it in VCL, but maybe extra code. In terms of favorite, a few small features that are partially hidden or not as obvious. One I want to mention, which is not strictly VCL, meaning visual, is the action list architecture. That's an extremely nice architecture that was ahead of his time, has been kind of ignored, but it rivals some of the modern architecture to separate the business logic from the UI, because that's what actions do. So I just want to spend like one word about one classic feature, very old feature that I don't think is really used effectively by all of the customers using VCL.
That's a good point. Bruno, if you're up for it, you're next.
Well, I really enjoyed the VCL. The VCL is really very well contained. It's very easy to interact with the operating system APIs. So you have a lot of things to do. And one thing that I really enjoy it is the easy deploy of the VCL applications. You have only one executable, and that's all you have to deploy for your app. I think that's a huge benefit for people who want to deploy and to distribute their applications. And I really enjoy it. But I think that the interaction with the operating system is really unrivaled with any other platform. I think that's really nice. If you want to do something that interacts with your window handle or with your some API, some different API with of the operating system, that's really great. I really enjoy it. And then now you have an extra layer, that's the themes layer. You can theme your application and use it like a FireMonkey or like any other of styled application. And I think that's an extra bonus for VCL applications.
Great, thank you. Dalia, you're next. The mysterious disembodied voice.
Well, when it comes to VCL comparing to FireMonkey, both have advantages and disadvantages depending on what you are doing with it. I would like to have VCL Monkey or Fire VCL combination. For instance, VCL is very thin layer on operating system controls, and this is why it is very fast and works great. But FireMonkey has some 3D modeling and 2D modeling very features that are great that VCL doesn't have. You can do that in VCL. It's not that you don't, but FireMonkey provides that out of the box, and it would be great if you could combine those two together so you can use some advantages of modeling part from the FireMonkey in VCL, and that would be great for Windows.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And then David.
Sure. Well, look, in terms of VCL versus FireMonkey, this is the VCL group, so I'm going to go VCL all the way right until we have the FireMonkey group, and then I'll be 100% FireMonkey. I'm going to go for a tip, actually. You probably know we've been focusing on high DPI quite a bit in the past, I don't know, 18 months or so. And you know, we have high DPI support in the VCL, and we have the high DPI image list and so forth. One useful thing is when you have custom drawing, it's quite common to specify the location of things in pixels. For example, I might draw a bit of text and then say, okay, the length of that text plus 4 pixels is a bit of a buffer. I'm going to draw something else. Or have a rectangle that I'm drawing to, and you know, specify the rectangle in pixel coordinates. And the question is, how do you scale that for a high DPI app? Because those 4 pixels are suddenly going to get very narrow when you have 200%, 300% application. We introduced methods in T-Control. There are a whole bunch of scale methods to scale, you know, scalar values, sorry, scalar as opposed to vector, but you know, single values or points or rectangles or so forth, so that you can wrap your pre-existing sort of pixel constants in these methods, and then your drawing will, you know, still work and drawing in the right place for a scaled form.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Well, I know that because I was the one who really wanted those methods, and we got them in.
That's good to know. That is really good to know, because that is really an important thing. But I hadn't thought about that in VCL. I know that's something in FireMonkey you have to think about, but I didn't know you had that in VCL. Holger, if you could go next. Oh, you're muted, Holger.
Let me go to the VCL first. Sorry for that. I tried to use the fancy spacebar, but the window didn't have focus, so it didn't work. So the VCL is, for me, the #1 thing for Windows is because there's simply so many controls already in the box for different use cases. Like, you can build an application really, really quickly, focusing on your code, and the user interface controls are just there without any customization at all. Right now, you really have a, I mean, I'm quite sure Nick Hodges is screaming right now, but a lot of mock-ups, and if you go to a customer, you can build a lot of user interfaces pretty quickly and show the customer already something that is quite usable and basically shows the way where you want to go. And then you can go into all the different properties and fine tune it and make it look even better. So that's the number one reason. You never reinvent the wheel. And even if you then dive into third party, there is so many controls out there that make it easy to build great user interfaces. And then what Marco stated, the architecture is so well done that, for example, what David just mentioned, the high DPI support, it's implemented in a way that existing controls can use that. So if you have third-party controls that did not have high DPI support before, if your third-party vendor implements the new virtual image list instead of the image list, because virtual image list inherits from the standard image list, you will get high DPI support in your applications for special buttons that you use, special grids that you used. And another thing is that your third-party vendor is also able to, the new image list concept is based on different image sources, the so-called image collections. So you can have an image collection using PNG images, but you can also have an image collection which is for SVG vector images, and vector images can be rescaled for any resolution. So you get a crisp, sharp VCL user interface for all the different displays that are out there. So as this is the VCL talk, we sometimes have to hear the argument, well, if you want to have good, crisp user interfaces that adapt to different display resolutions, you have to use FireMonkey. That is not true anymore, because the VCL, the architecture has been upgraded, and it's not just an upgrade, it basically has been, classes have been added so that you can just use the same benefits as with any other modern user interface framework.
Okay, great, thank you, Holger. Ian.
Well, I have to be a fan of the VCL, I think. I think the thing about the VCL is that with a T panel, a T label, T edit box, and T form, you can do, well, and T button, but you can do 99% of user interfaces and tweak everything the way you want, particularly with the T panel. You know, it can be used for layouts and all sorts of things like that. The only thing that I think it would be missing from the VCL are animations and stuff like that. If you usually find that as soon as you start to do something particularly clever that is unique, you know, it's not, oh, this is not part of a standard Windows control, that's when you start looking at FireMonkey or third-party controls. And you know, my IDE is full of third-party controls of various types, which is obviously the benefit of Delphi. I mean, why use Delphi? Because there's so many components out there that work with the VCL that you can pretty much do anything you want and pay a very small amount of money compared to how much your time will cost you and how much someone will pay you for your time. And you can produce an application that is an executable and will run off a memory stick. People freak out when we show them a client server product and I can give it to them on a thumb drive, a USB thumb drive, and it will run. And I know it will run on every single version of Windows, actually mostly from Windows XP upwards if it's a very old version of Delphi, but certainly from Windows 7, you know, it will work, and there's no complicated libraries, and the graphics cards aren't going to be a problem, and oh, you've got this weird set of screens. They mostly, we can cope with that in code and things like that. FireMonkey, much more powerful, but also for me, it tends to sometimes get in the way, and create the user interface can actually get in the way of creating the user interface. You've got all these extra properties and all these other things to consider with FireMonkey that you don't with the VCL, and sometimes it's not as quick as a VCL as well, which is, you know, there's a little formula out there of reactivity. You know, if it takes less than half a second when you click on something, then people lose focus on what's happening and start to think your program's not responsive. So the VCL doesn't suffer from that problem, works and keeps working.
Okay, yep. And then Victory.
In my case, I will go for VCL too, because historically I've been doing almost everything with VCL in my life. I work mostly with factory floor automation, and Windows is part of it. We have some very sensitive and complicated applications sometimes that are running for ages in computers back from Windows 95, 98, that maybe the client had to update his machine for a different version of Windows, and we are still working on with the same compiled version we did, I don't know, 15 years ago, and supporting the client with minimum changes. This is, for me, very important. And still, in the case of FireMonkey, when we are talking about mobiles, I still have some problems because, I mean, bit by bit, it's taking over in the app scenario, but it's still too attached to versions of operational systems, Androids, iOS, everyday different changes. And this makes it a little harder to think about solutions for example, factories. In the past, we used to have some Windows Mobile barcode collectors running Windows Mobile that I could not support with Delphi. That nowadays makes me very happy to actually be changing these old things for new Android-based collectors. But again, in case user decides 2, 3, 5 years from now to buy another collector, most probably I will not be able to simply upload my old version that I pre-compiled for Android. I don't know which version. So it is still complicated in these terms, not from our side, I mean, but from the side of the vendors.
Okay. And actually, one comment I did, just to make sure it's clear, is that we're not saying that the FireMonkey's wrong necessarily, just talking about maybe some of the advantages of VCL. And a few of you did echo that. Dahlia's comments, I've been in that same boat a lot, as I'm like, oh, I want to use this from FireMonkey or this from VCL. And it's like, oh, wait, nope. But that does bring me to one of the questions we just had. What about combining VCL and FireMonkey forms in the same application? And if I remember correctly, David Millington, didn't you have a component for that long ago?
This should not be brought up. I don't know why Embarcadero even hired me after writing that.
I was looking at it only yesterday.
It was useful, and I haven't actually looked at maintaining it for several years. But yes, it let people host FireMonkey forms in VCL. It used a lot of hacks. I don't recommend it. I understand it's useful.
Well, I think the main problem is you have two applications when you combine FireMonkey and VCL. You have two singletons combined together. Each one is running its own event loop, and this is the problem.
Yeah, that's the
that's
main
right.
issue. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
What's happening is that FireMonkey and VCL each of them for Windows has a very specific message loop implementation, which is the core of anything you do. And VCL in particular has lots of hooks into the message hook for dialog, for a bunch of other things that don't apply to FireMonkey and vice versa. And as I was mentioning, you end up with two application objects. Each has a handle to an invisible window somewhere, or is not invisible. It's a point. It's a window that is zero width, so it is visible, but you can see it. and so they do use similar tricks when you put the two together. I mean, it doesn't work. It kind of works. It can be done, but it's not officially recommended. We looked into unifying the message loop in a way that we could have a single application object serving both, but that would be a huge undertake and a bit risky in terms of stability. So eventually there was a decision against it. Now, there is one way that we all semi-officially support, which is one of the two should live in a DLL, because if you're building a DLL, then the DLL does not enable the application object. Basically, it's sitting there, but it's a null. It's empty. Well, hasn't got a handle to a main window and so forth. So through a DLL, you can somehow work around some of the main problems. Although then you have if you're using runtime libraries, you have two RTL. I mean, there are other issues that come along not nicely. The drawback that, again, you are losing the ability for one of the two sides to work with the application objects. So things like, I don't know, hints or other things will work only for the main application, but not the secondary you are injecting via DLL. So even that is kind of working, but has a number of known issues.
Yeah, it's somebody commented about REM objects Hydra, which is does essentially the same thing. It does use it as a DLL or a package of some sort.
I think for most people, I don't know about actually other people, but certainly people I work with and myself as well, I always view FireMonkey and VCL as different platforms and for different purposes. So I like FireMonkey. I like a lot of the features in FireMonkey. I particularly like the way you can host some controls in other controls in other controls. You know, that kind of stacking and that iterative building of controls, so that you can actually almost create a custom control of your own that does all sorts of lovely things just literally by dragging and dropping some functions together. And I really like that. And so if I'm going to target something like Linux, which you know, you can do, and definitely iOS and Android, I have apps that work on iOS and Android, you've got no choice but to use FireMonkey, and it's great. It does exactly what you want, but you are narrowed down in what you can do. You know, you're almost writing slightly different language to the kind of thing you're writing with VCL. The properties are very slightly different. The way that you're dealing with some of the controls is very slightly different as well. And that's how I approach it. I don't know how other people approach it. So I'll either decide it's going to be a VCL project or it's going to be a FireMonkey project. And if I'm going to choose FireMonkey, there's specific reasons why I choose FireMonkey. Either I want it to look amazingly beautiful, you know, lots of FireMonkey animations, or I'm trying to go multi-platform on it. And that's kind of my ethos, I think, behind it. And there's so many VCL projects out there. If you're maintaining anything, you can of course write modular apps that host other apps. You know, you can write a FireMonkey main app that hosts bits of other applications. We have some apps that do that. We have some reporting apps that don't actually have any FireMonkey equivalents, and they're hosted inside there. So you just host the application window, and there you've got you know, two apps running together. But those are totally different apps. It's not even, you know, different application objects. They're actually different applications.
Yeah. But
I really agree with Ian. I think that things are very different, and mix them. It's something that doesn't look good, because you are having two paradigms, two ways of seeing things, and two user interfaces that are clashing together. And you have something that, for example, you have problems with tabbing if you have a mixed window, FireMonkey and VCL. I think FireMonkey is great for what it does great. It's great for animations. It's great for different designs. It's great for multi-platform. But VCL is also great for creating Windows apps. And if you are creating Windows-only apps, the VCL is the way to go. If you are creating multi-platform apps and you don't want to recreate the whole UI, the whole thing, yes, you should go to FireMonkey. I think they're different, and mix them. It's not a good way to go. You can use your business logic. You can share your business logic between FireMonkey and the VCL. Yes, you can do it anyway. But to mix the UI, I don't think it's a good idea.
okay, probably good advice. Ian, here's a specifically question to you. You did the webinar on the Alameda controls a while back and said you were going to do another one. So
I am.
coming.
In fact, it is. We're working on a little project in the background that I'm not sure if we're supposed to talk about or not, but we're doing some tests. It's not secret. Okay, I can see Marco shaking his head. I don't know whether he's shaking his head for what I'm saying, but we're working on a project at the moment to just do some speed tests and see some comparisons between how we do various things. And Jim co-opted me into joining that project and actually producing something. He baited me actually to do something with the Almeida Dev controls to do a Fluent UI version of the particular app that we're trying to produce. And I'm going to actually record that as a webinar as well as for the purposes of what we're doing. In fact, I'm a little bit late. I've probably got to do it later on today, but the idea behind that is that I'm actually going to produce a VCL version, a FireMonkey version, and a Fluent UI version with the Almeida controls. And actually Holger will get excited, but I'm also going to do a web call version and an iOS and an Android version of the same app. The idea is to use the back-end logic that is just an interface, you know, so that the UI is only calling the interface, which will please people like Nick Hodges and all those people that say code to an interface. What we're trying to demonstrate there really is the power of Delphi. If I write the interface once to do the main core business logic of this application, then the user interface should be straightforward. And in fact, with the Fluent UI controls from Almeida Dev, you'll get a nice, pretty, you know, Fluent UI moving graduation on the buttons and stuff like that, which the UI takes care of, and all of the logic and all the other part of it is actually a shared unit that the VCL, the FireMonkey, and all the other apps can store, even the TMS web call one as well. So yes, it is coming. I'm sorry, I'm slow, but I also have a full-time job, and you know, I have to do those things to earn money. And surprisingly enough, the bills don't want me to work for nothing.
If you figure that one out, let me know.
About VCL and FireMonkey, I always like to talk about scenarios. And here in Brazil, we mostly talking about Windows almost always. Okay, so I have this friend of mine developing software for clinics. And when Delphi started to support FireMonkey, he was like, okay, fantastic, because okay, I can do software for Windows for the clinic. But the problem is that the doctor has MacBooks. So the doctor working there for the clinic sometimes have a MacBook, and I could not put my application to run directly in the MacBook. Now I can. So this is an option. In my case, for the factories, it's always Windows, but the managers or the directors, they have MacBooks, like personal stuff that they want to see at home. I don't know, some graphic or stuff, and I could never put my application directly in their MacBook for them to do so. I always had to provide some Windows way of direct access to the factory, remote access to the factory or something like that. Nowadays, I can simply provide this small application for some production result in FireMonkey with a very nice interface. So here, sometimes it's not a matter that you're going to develop the whole application in FireMonkey or something, but you can now provide support for the doctor or for the director or for the CEO or something, because it's a whole different scenario from Europe or America, where MacBooks, for example, are more common.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a couple MVPs in the audience that have left a few tips that I've posted. Craig pointed out that there's GLScene and some other libraries as well that make it easy to embed 3D high performance graphics in VCL applications. And Ray pointed out that advanced graphics animations available in FMX make even when targeting Windows makes sense. So it goes to like what Victor was just saying. It really depends on the scenario, and that's one thing I think is really important. That frequently I get people asking me, well, which is better? And it's like, well, neither's better. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and so that's something really important to consider. I had a question here I was going to ask. I think it had something to do with moving between versions. If there was any tips on when you're upgrading or migrating from one version of Delphi to the next, as far as moving your applications forward. So not sure who would, if you would like to take that, go for it. I'm sure that's something all of you have tackled at one point or another.
Well, I can say something. You need to have version control for that's the first step, so you can make undos of what goes wrong, because if you have some properties, new versions can have some properties that you don't have in older versions. Moving forward is usually not a problem, but moving backwards is. So if you have to open new project in old Delphi, then that is a problem, because you may have some properties you cannot, they are not there, and you need to delete them or remove them manually to open the project and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. The Delphi moves forward really well, but a couple of times I tried to move backwards. That does not usually go very well.
Biggest problem I always find is moving a major version of the IDE along. I have a lot of third-party controls, and it's usually installing all those. It takes a long time. Not so much upgrading the project. Once the third-party controls are installed, actually most things seem to just work out of the box. And well, apart from when the auto reference counting went, that was the only slight change. But apart from that, yeah, it's always, you open up the project, and as long as you've got the right third-party controls, nearly all of it works straight away. So it's pretty good. I mean, you know, you can take a Delphi 7 project and upgrade it to Delphi 10.4 without much effort, as long as third-party controls haven't changed significantly. Just put some time aside.
Yeah, I've been involved in a few of those projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you need to go.
Third-party controls for using a lot of them, particularly if they are integrated together. So you have two third-party controls from different vendors, and they require some sort of cross-compilation between them to get the various packages going. I've found that to be quite a nightmare at times, but it's generally, yeah, you can generally get things going pretty well without too much effort.
And it's usually a good thing. Nobody mentioned it yet, but when I tend to do it, you have to open manually each form in order to update the form and the DFM and all that kind of stuff. Might be trivial to say it, but if you forget to open one of the forms, compile your application, and run it, you might into issues while it's running that you haven't seen just because you didn't open it up in the IDE and saved it again. So that's what I always struggle with, because I tend to lose track which forms are open, and so that is something that you really need to do, especially if properties are removed, which seldom happens. But even if properties are added, you might struggle when you run it without opening it in the designer first.
That's a good tip. I'd forgotten about that, actually. I had made a tool at one point, an IDE add-in that would go through and open all the forms for me when I was moving between versions, to do specifically that, to make sure everything was synced up. And it actually had a few other things. If there was specific things I knew needed to be done in the moving, it would take care of those for me.
Yeah, one of those things is if something gets updated, like a data type gets updated with something, so the serialization for the DFM changes. So if you open it up in the designer and save it again, the new format is being used. And if you run your application without doing that, your runtime basically accepts a different format from what has been serialized into the DFM. So at that point, it's going to crash. So that's the reason why you have to. I know there's tools in the third-party world out there who do these kind of migrations. I haven't used them myself because my projects aren't simply that big. But I know there's tools out there that open up the form and do all that for you, I think.
GExperts has a component replacer. So if you've got a component set that is no longer being maintained, you can actually select all of those in the whole project. It'll do it on the form or just the selected ones, but the whole project, and it'll map the components and the properties. So even if the properties are completely incompatible, it'll actually map those over, and that can be very handy if you're upgrading a project and you've got some third-party control that doesn't exist anymore. Open it in your old IDE, you know, use the new components if you can, or map them to something bland, and then you can open it in the new IDE without these. Because we've all done it. We've opened up the IDE and there's a missing component, and he says, "Oh, such and such doesn't exist. Do you want to ignore or cancel?" And you say cancel or ignore, and suddenly the components disappeared, and you're like, "Oh no, there's 4,000 of those." Oh, yeah.
That's why version control is so important.
Yeah.
And there is something for old projects. For example, if you have a Delphi 7 project and you are migrating for Delphi 10.4, you will have problems with Unicode characters. That's a huge problem that must be tackled in the middle of the migration. But that's just for very old projects. 2007, 2008, that you are migrating right now, but except from that, yes, it works.
Yeah, and then actually, there's another question here. Actually, so one thing I wanted to mention that was kind of alluded to, though, a couple things, is that's one thing I love about Delphi is because Delphi shipped with VCL source, it kind of created this culture where most tech partners give you the option to buy your source. And so I always tell people, make sure you're getting your source if you're planning to maintain your project, because more often than not, I've had situations where I've made changes to the component source, and then when I get the new version, then I'm doing a merge between them using Beyond Compared. So that's really important to have that, where you can have a migration path of your own, where you're not reliant on a third party, but then also having the third party that's introducing new features and fixing other things as well is really useful. So I think that's really just kind of the best scenario there to tackle that. There's a question here about building high-speed user interfaces, and I lost it here, which one it was, but he was comparing it to, I think, some sort of DJ application. I know FL Studio uses Delphi, but they use their own UI widgets. Are there any tips or suggestions you might have for how to build high-speed VCL applications that have a higher speed user interface, if you've done anything along those lines?
Well, a lot of components, I'm unmuted. A lot of components offer begin update and end update as methods. It's always overlooked. People tend to look deep. But for example, if you have a list box or a combo box and you fill it with a lot of values, there's like a begin update and end update method. So you create a nice try finally block and call begin update before it, and in the finally you say end update, and your UI is not going to flicker. And many third-party controls, TMS is one of them, they have that for their grids, for their mapping controls. Everything has begin update, end update. So there's no delay when it's being updated. That's the first thing to remember. And you can even do that if you calculate the values right. You can do that in a background thread. Easy now with the Embarcadero parallel library. You can prepare that all nice and clean in the background, and then you have one thread that you now with anonymous methods that you can call really easy with tthread.synchronize, and then there you add the code, and there you can use begin update, end update again to fill the data into your user interface. And that's what I found doesn't yield to any flicker, no blocking, no delay, and that works great.
That is a good tip.
Actually, yesterday there was this fantastic presentation on high performance Delphi by Primos. It was very nice, interesting. Maybe if you missed, it would be nice to go there and check on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he has a book, actually, so I will point out, if you go to the DelphiCon site, if you go to the perks tab, perks page, I guess it is, there is a 25% discount code on that book as well as some others, and we do have a few that we'll be giving away as well at the end of the conference. So definitely, if you don't have that book yet, or I want to say we have five different books with 25% discounts right now on the website. So go check that out and get those books. probably want to have all of them, to be honest. I think there's a, let's see, I guess, well, and then, oh my goodness, Alistair has his book he just put out that's Code Faster in Delphi. And then Holger has 3 books. I think I have all 3 of them behind me. So
It's 4, isn't it?
is it 4?
Yeah, I cheated. I translated wrong from German to English, so that's why it's 4. So the TMS
Holger,
web core is available in English and German.
yeah, now that Holger's finished his PhD, he's a book writing machine.
And Andrea Magni, he has a really good book on FireMonkey out as well on
Yes.
FMX. Yeah.
Yep, that just came out as well. So yeah, do check out the perks page. And there's the new Delphi Books website that has some books on there as well. So anyway,
one thing about the mention about performance and graphical capabilities, that's worth keeping in mind that while VCL is mostly mapped to GDI because components are user components, I mean the Microsoft ones and so forth, there has been for a long time good integration for DirectX drawing surfaces. So you can just create a T-Direct2D canvas and paint on a surface within your form, or just take over the entire form surface with a painting canvas. That allows you to, well, you have to use the primitive operations, but they're fairly rich and not difficult to use. So you can do any painting with primitive DirectX, and that, I mean, performance there is really different compared to GDI type of painting. So that's an important thing. And the other thing is that it's another like little known issue, but within the T-image component, you can use the WIC, Windows Imaging component, that has a bunch of transformations on graphic and other operations. This is a Microsoft provided component that's relatively fast. And it's a bit hidden in the system, but it's been embedded for, I don't know, probably 10 years now in VCL. I mean, these are not new features by any term. These have been around for quite some time, but I don't think they're commonly known and used.
I think also just don't use too many components. Just keep your user interface really clean if you want it to be fast. Probably avoid VCL styles. I'm not sure if double buffering improves performance, but there's a property on various controls that enables that, and that probably help as well.
Also layering controls, one control in another. The deeper the layer you have, the more problems with painting. This goes for FireMonkey and VCL. The more layers you have, the deepest layer is the one that slows everything down.
yes, yeah.
And I'd like to add that I think that performance is also perception, and is yes, but sometimes there is the perception of the user. The user, the application seems to be sluggish because it's not well updated. For example, you are doing some operation that blocks the UI, and the application seems to be blocked, and this makes the user think that there is no performance. I think that using parallel threads to do some applications, using background threads to update your data, and using all this kind of stuff not to block the UI and to make the updates faster, I think that will make the user more confident that the application at least seems to be working more efficiently than it should be.
Yeah, it's so much easier now doing background tasks with the parallel programming library and using the create anonymous thread method. Yeah, when you used to have to write stuff with T-thread, you ended up writing quite a lot of code to do stuff in the background, but it's now a lot easier than it used to be.
We also have one question here in the chat where an attendee says, like, hey, every form is created automatically when Delphi VCL applications start. That is true, but if you don't change the settings, that by default Delphi puts all forms into the auto create column. First of all, there's tools options. There's a setting now where you can change that behavior, that it's not happening anymore. And of course, this is one of the remnants of the rapid application development that was like so fascinating when Delphi was released in the 90s. You just pressed F9 and it started away. Obviously, if you have a more complex application, you usually only create your main form there and a couple of data modules that you need all the time. But all the other forms, obviously, you have like object references to the forms and then create the forms on demand. If you have a huge amount of forms that you need to have in memory at all times, you can do that, as we mentioned a couple of times now, using the parallel library in the background. And obviously you can't draw in the background thread, but just preparing, like loading the resources from the exe or whatever, that can be done all in the background while the application's running. And if you really change the setting that it's being auto-created by default, that's already a great first step. Might of course lead to a couple of hurdles at first, because you expect it to be there. And what I sometimes do, I don't know, Marco maybe can comment on that if that is a good practice. I sometimes remove the var to the form. I remove that, so I can't really call that into, on accident. I remove that, but I don't know if that's hurting the IDE somewhat. If I remove that var reference.
No, you can remove that var reference. Actually, I think I recommend doing it in some of my books because it is. I mean, we can debate if it still makes sense in 2020 to keep some of the default, make it simple, make it foolproof for the newbie type of features like auto creating forms, having a global variable for a form, which is a bad idea per se, or even some of the way the components are exposed and other things. But at the end of the day, I mean, when someone starts, learning and understanding the language, so it's very easy to work around these things. And honestly, it is important for someone new to the product to be able to click, drop a button, run, and have something that runs and doesn't require like extra code. It remains one significant advantage of Delphi compared to languages where you have to write 200 lines of code to get a form and a button up on your screen. So, but it is true. I mean, I've thought many times about making the creation of the form variable like an option that experts would disable. But at the end of the day, it's fairly easy to like delete and get rid of it. So yeah, but that's something I recommend because it is confusing that you have a class and one specific instance of the class that you can assume it represents the class as a global thing. Well, no, it doesn't need to. It might not be created up front for saving time. You might have two of them, and if you have two, what the heck is that variable referring to? If you have two forms that are identical. Yeah, there are many things that can. And again, we can always consider simplifying it and making some options in the IDE, but I honestly don't think it's really a top priority.
Well, that's a problem when you are trying to prototype and that prototype send in production. You have to make the difference. If you want to make a quick prototype and do something quickly, then default setups are good. But if you are trying to design application from the scratch, you cannot just open the IDE and start dropping buttons. You have to design application on different level and decide what goes where and what do you need, what you don't need.
Yeah,
this is not the tool, a problem of the tool. You have same people complain about the same things in Xcode and Android Studio and all other tools. You have difference between quick prototyping and difference between what you do when you design properly application for production.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. One of the things I love about Delphi is that it kind of goes like Marco was saying, is that it makes it easy to get started, get going quickly. But then when you're like realize, oh, I can optimize this or I can improve this or whatever, then you can do that in order to make things better. So it it gets you going quickly and gives you the boost you need, but then doesn't hold you back when you want to go beyond that. And the next question I wanted to get to, and we're running out of time, and people are really enjoying this, so we will definitely try and do more of these panels in the future, but is around MVVM or MVC in VCL, and what's the best way to tackle that, and what's opinions on that?
It depends on who you ask, because there's about 15 different opinions, isn't there? There's a lot of frameworks out there. If Frank Lauter was around, I'm sure he would have a 15-minute discourse on MVVM, because there's a framework that uses that.
He'll be in the Fire Monkey session.
Oh, will he? There you go. I'm sure. Ask him that question. He will not shut up for an hour, I'm sure. I know, why not? I think there are a lot of frameworks out there to support MVVM, but I think most of us here are sort of long-term developers and work on fairly substantial projects, realize that the key thing is to divorce your user interface from what actually happens behind the scenes. And as soon as you start deploying projects that are going to things like a set of web pages written in Delphi, you know, TMS Web Core or IntraWeb or whatever technology you use, or FireMonkey or VCL or something, you know, like iOS as well, via those technologies, that's when the model view model really doesn't just become a fancy technique that posh people use, you know, experts in the field use. It's something you have to use, otherwise you end up rewriting your code 1,500 times just because there's a new model of an iPhone out or something random like that, and you've made some assumptions in your code. So MVVM, for me, I don't know about the others, but I think it's inevitable you're going to use it sooner or later, and good coding practices mean that's how you write code.
And it's good to say, like, you might feel overwhelmed if you try to do these things right away from the start and try to do them perfectly. So I, for one, always, when I talk to other developers, try to do it like step by step, like for a Delphi developer, especially where you have these projects with data modules with hundreds of classes and forms with hundreds of things in them, and the code implementation is inside of all the events. Like, start slowly, separate the model from your forms first. That's the first step, and then you go step by step. And hopefully, and it has proven to be a concept that worked, at some point the switch just clicks, and you do it naturally, that you separate all these different areas of concerns into different units, and you realize how you can connect them to each other. And then one thing that some languages can neglect, but with Delphi, always memory management, where we have an expert here on the panel as well. She's written a book about it that hasn't been mentioned so far. So if you have Delphi memory management, that is something you have to think out as well. If you, for example, take a Java book or a C# book, they don't care about that at all, because they have their garbage collection, and they simply set a reference to nil and see ya, you know? So that is something you have to consider with Delphi as well, which makes it a little bit more challenging, especially as what we talked about before, if you have been working with all those pre-created references before and haven't even created. I mean, I've seen customers that have running applications in productions that don't create a class themselves. It's all basically using the var references from the different forms. So step by step is my advice.
Okay, it is top. Oh, it's top of the hour. The next session is starting, so if people need to jump, you can do that. It is running in parallel when this happens. But I do want to just go around and give everybody a chance to say, hey, this is where you can find me online, or let Dahlia remind everybody about her great Delphi Memory Management book. So just real quick, everybody take 1 minute and tell people where they can find you online, and we will start with Alistair.
Okay, so my website is learndelphi.tv. You know, I've just published a book in the last couple of months, Learn Code Faster in Delphi, which is all about being more productive in the Delphi IDE. And there's a lot. It's a short book, so it doesn't take too long to read, but there's a lot of information in it. And it's quite a fun read, I think. So yeah, have a look at learndelphi.tv. I've got YouTube videos. I'm up to 160 or something like that. Sort of free videos, and I've got some commercial videos as well. If you're wanting, particularly the VCL, if you're wanting to know in depth the VCL, they're originally done in Delphi XE3, but they're just as relevant now because the VCL is so stable. So yeah, cheers.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. Even some of the stuff Alistair does for beginners, I'll be looking at, I'm like, I didn't know that. It's kind of embarrassing to admit. Bruno, real quick.
I can be found at my blog, blogs.mvps.com/Bisonino, or my Twitter, Bisonino. You can find me there. I'm not very I don't tweet a lot. I write some articles there in my blog, and you can also send me an email, sonino@revolution.com.br. I'll be pleased to talk with you.
And actually, I will, or for panelists, you can put your links or whatever in the chat window, and that'll go out to everybody. Dalia, real quick.
Well, my website, the shortest is daliapblogspot.com, and from there you can find all other references. And I just announced today a new book, event-based and asynchronous programming in Delphi. So some of the topics we covered here about moving stuff in background thread, not blocking UI and stuff like that, you can find in that. I expect somewhere by the end of the month it will be released.
Wow, great. David.
Sure. GoToWebinar has frozen a couple of times, so hopefully it won't freeze while I'm talking to you. I'm david.millington@embarcadero.com, and you can email anytime. It's always really good to hear from people. I tend to say in things like this that I will reply to every email I get, but I won't necessarily reply fast, just due to the volume of stuff, and I apologize for that. But I do read everything, and I do my absolute best to reply to everything. One topic, actually, we were talking about MVVP and other sort of similar models. Something that I think would be interesting to get people's opinion on is what you'd like to see in the IDE there. Some frameworks provide something out of the box. Marco and I occasionally talk about whether we should as well. So this would be a really interesting topic for you to email either of us about, in case we can implement a sanctioned way in the IDE with the VCL to have that kind of framework. However, point is, email anytime. Really happy to hear from you.
Great. Holger.
Well, yeah, my blog is on Flix Engineering. I posted the URL in the chat. And well, as already been mentioned, I blog there a lot. I also blog on tmssoftware.com about their controls. And one thing I'd like to point out, as we had the high performance and like the user interface responsiveness, my hands-on book, the first one, has a practical example with a database, 8 million records, and it's reproducible. You can download the database from the internet, and it builds not only a web service, but also VCL client application, which does everything, queries everything in the background, high responsive UI, and also high DPI support, everything with Delphi, described step by step so you can follow through. So that is something you might want to look into, where, as said, it's the hands-on book #1 of the series. Available on Amazon. Amazon is my publisher, so look for my name there. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to do more of these panels, so stay tuned. We'll have more of these. These are great. Ian. Oh, there you are.
I was so busy answering questions.
Oh, good.
I've been answering a lot of questions. Yes, all my contact details are in the window, about.me /Ian Barker, code.show.com. Just look on there /blog, and get me on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. You can always get hold of me on Twitter, @punctuation on Twitter. And I get a lot of contact from Delphi people saying things about stuff. So there you go.
Fantastic. Yeah, you are on. It's like every time I go on Twitter, there's like a tweet. You just barely tweeted something.
I don't mess about. I think they should pay me because I think I'm their biggest user. I know a lot of weird people as well, like Microsoft people and people at various other organizations, and some ex-Twitter people as well. And so they encourage me to use it, shall we put it that way.
Okay. And then Marco.
Again, my contact information is marco.cantu@embarcadero.com. I blog on the blogs@embarcadero.com platform. I also have a personal blog with other errands at blog.marcocantu.com. What else? VCL remains a focus. If you haven't, go look at the roadmap we published yesterday in the commentary. We're really working very actively on making sure VCL remains the top library on Windows. For example, if you look at the high DPI and you compare it what is available on any of the Microsoft owned libraries or any third-party library, we are way ahead. The WinForms on high DPI has tremendous issues, and so it's true for other libraries coming from Microsoft. But we're also planning, integrating with what Microsoft is providing and making sure that we really remain active on supporting features the day they get out in a very timely fashion. So we love the VCL. We are going to expand it and extend it in terms of platform integration. And again, the roadmap has some of the details and information about that.
All right. And then Victory.
So my website is tkssoftware.com/victory, but the best way is always to Google my name, Victory Fernandez. From there, you can get to find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and whatever. Very nice to have you guys here, and I'll wait for tomorrow. There's another panel tomorrow, so I'll see you guys there.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this. And thank you to everybody, especially those of you that stuck around to the end of the panel here. And we will see you at the rest of DelphiCon. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.